What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I knew I'd say that I would be uploading more and more often, but I'm a blue collar guy. We're very busy, work sucks, the weather sucks, I have a family to look out for, so I'm very delayed on what I can and can't do. Regardless, though, this is one video I've been hoping to make for a good while, and it's mostly on the nature of the idea of legacy characters. Now, I originally only had one stance on legacy characters. And what I mean by legacy characters, I mean the legacy characters that take over the legacy of another character. You have the Robins that take over for Batman, Superboy, blah, blah. Your standard comic things. And while that works occasionally, there's a lot of characters, specifically in gaming, that when they're meant to take over the role for a pre existing character, they're kind of lacking. And with it being my intro and all at the moment, I just would like to say this: Atsu is not a worthy heir for Jin. She is unworthy of the mantle of Ghost, and that's my take on the matter. However, when I said this previously, I think I was on TikTok when I said this, somebody said, "Oh, well, if she was a white straight male, you would have no issue with her being a horrible lead." And that got me thinking. Back when I was a kid, back when I was younger, there was one character who my entire time playing as him, despite being well written, I hated him so much. And it's because the game that I played previously, he was such a stark contrast to this character that it made me really hate him up until the end of the game. And a lot of people are going to hate me for it, but this character is none other than Edward Kenway. Edward was such a stark contrast to Connor Kenway. Now, a lot of people might hate me also for this, but Assassin's Creed 3 was my first Assassin's Creed game. Yes, I went back and played all the other ones and fell in love with the series. But Connor found me at a moment in my life where I was trying to decide who I wanted to be. I came from a religious family that didn't really take religion seriously. I felt conflicted about the world around me and my own morals. Connor's stoicism, his sense of heroism, and even just his compassion to those around him, even his naivety. A lot of people like to say that Connor's naive. No, he's not being naive. He's just very focused on his goals. It's the hypocrisy of the world around him that he can't stand. And there go a lot of people want to call his character naive. But Connor was such a stark contrast to so many other characters around us because we get characters who are very emotional, very too fueled by vengeance. Like previously, if you play Assassin's Creed 2, Ezio was so fueled by vengeance. That doesn't make him a bad character. Ezio is actually a well written character, but we'll touch more on that later. Connor was more goal oriented to simply stopping the Templars, saving his people, and saving the colonies. A lot of people want to say Connor was focused on vengeance, but other than his goal towards Lee, he didn't really care for vengeance. Lee seemed to be the only one he really had it out for. If you play a lot of the early Assassin's Creed missions, there are moments he really could have just wiped the floor with a lot of the early Templars. Like there's a scene where he's literally looking at Johnson and he's like dropping a box of tea in front of him. Bro could have just gone over there and killed him. We've seen Connor. Connor has fought through armies. Nothing's stopping him. But he doesn't because his mission was save before actually kill. At least that's how I've always interpreted it. Now, when we jump over to Edward, we have such a stark contrast. He's not a legacy character. Actually, Connor only brings Edward up once in the actual game, and that's in the DLC. Unless you've read AC Forsaken, you would not know who Edward was before the release of Assassin's Creed Black Flag. And younger me was led to believe that Edward was still gonna be like someone heroic. When they announced Assassin's Creed Black Flag, a lot of the promotion showed Edward as an assassin, but very rebellious, still fighting for the cause. I really thought we'd have an assassin very early on as a pirate, and I was surprised to find out that that wasn't the case. But for you to understand how I attribute both Edward and Atsu to having the same flaws, but Atsu unfortunately suffering the most of my dislike. We need to look at the framework between the characters that came before them and how they fit in the respective universes. To do this, we'll actually first start with the Kenways. Now, this may be something that a lot of people don't know if you're not a deep lore Assassin's Creed fan is the Kenway family is actually the direct descendants from the Ezio bloodline. I would believe that's the father's bloodline for Kenway, for Desmond. So we still have that heroic legacy within their blood. Now, prior to the release of Assassin's Creed 4, we were led to believe that Hathan might have been the only black sheep within the Kenway family, with the rest of the members being assassins and Hathan being a Templar. However, in the framework of how we're looking at this, where Atsu comes after Jin, Connor came before Edward. So we got the introduction to Connor, his personality, his code of ethics, and the Kenway family in a nutshell. And compared to both his son and his grandson, Edward kind of sucks. Even Hathan is regarded as one of the better characters in Assassin's Creed 3 because of how well he's written, of how charismatic he is, how ruthless he can be, and just how intelligent he is. Connor, while lacking in a lot of that intelligence, makes up for it in heart, brutality, skill, and his unwavering conviction to give it his all for the Creed. Edward, at the start of the game, was none of these things. And going into it, I really hated this man. One, yes, I get you're a pirate, you might be fighting people, but once again, we're not shown Edward's skills or how he's able to easily handle the skills of an assassin without ever receiving assassin training. Even when he's given a hidden blade, he's somehow very proficient with it. Once more, no proper training. He's a very stealthy and ruthless individual. And yes, you can argue that a lot of the assassin tactics, while the individuals make up for it in more better knowledge of it, they might be very simple for anybody to be able to pick up, which could be correct. But Edward was definitely not intelligent. Edward was throwing himself into the wolves' den by getting involved with the Templars, backstabbing the assassins without even knowing who these people are. Threw himself into this conflict thinking he could make a pretty penny out of this. And throughout the entirety of Black Flag, it's Edward's greed that just bothers me so much. But it's a greed that's consistent throughout the entire game. And he keeps getting screwed over for it. He keeps getting backstabbed for it. He gets betrayed by his friends. He gets betrayed by the guy he was planning on already making a deal with. And I don't doubt that if Bartholomew hadn't betrayed Edward, Edward probably would have betrayed him. Edward wants to talk about honor, or at least he has an idea of what honor should be, without actually truly ever acting on it. Throughout the entire game, though, Edward has a guide. He has Mary, Mary who sees in him what he can be. And she's honestly a constant that brings up his failings. He's not really making it as a pirate. His legacy will mean nothing. He's chasing a glory that does not exist. He abandoned the woman he loved, chasing money, and he wouldn't stop chasing money. For a majority of Black Flag, it was very annoying to play as Edward up until the point where he has his epiphany, when he's finally hidden rock bottom, when he's lost it all, and he's finally being told by his own conscience to change course. And so Edward decides to right the wrongs that he has made. He sets out, seeks out the assassins, and joins the Brotherhood. He doesn't officially join the Caribbean Brotherhood, he joins the British Brotherhood later when he returns back home, but he still attempted to right the wrongs that he did in the Caribbean. And the biggest thing is, even the villain acknowledges this. When the villain calls Edward out for all the atrocity he's done throughout his life, Edward admits it, accepts this, but he also points out at Torres that killing him rights a far greater wrong than ever Edward could have done. By killing Torres, Edward ensures that the Templars will never achieve the power of the observatory to lord it over mankind. And even Torres looks at Edward and says, "These ideals suit a man like you," because Edward rose from being a scoundrel to a man who now had a higher calling, a higher purpose. He was now someone I believe was worthy of the Kenway legacy, of starting the Kenway legacy, of me looking at him and be like, yes, this is who Connor's grandfather is. And if the robes that Connor wears really are somehow accidentally passed down from Edward to Connor, then Connor, just as Edward, was worthy of wearing those robes. But the same cannot be said for Atsu and taking over Jin's legacy as the ghost. Because whereas Edward was a horrible person and he eventually changed and became a better person, his writing was very consistent throughout the whole game to ensure that. They made sure that his character didn't waver. There were moments in the gameplay where some quests didn't line up correctly, where you had, like, I think when you got to get back to Havana, go after Torres, you have a character who knows you, but we don't really know her. And the reason for that is if you haven't gone back to Havana and done one of the Brotherhood missions, because you did backstab them and snitch them out, you wouldn't know who this character is. So in that regard, there was a little bit of a similar mix-up as with AC Black Flag as we do have in Ghost of Yotei, and I will get into that. But before we look at Atsu, we have to look at Jin, because similar to Connor, I fell in love with Jin's character. Jin was stoic, he was heroic, he was selfless. I think the only part of Jin that really did bother me was his naivety in wanting to abandon Samurai Way, especially when you look at actual samurai history and realize not all of them were like that. So it wasn't really the samurai code he was abandoning; it was more the Shimura code, like the way his uncle raised him to be. Nonetheless, Jin was a very selfless individual in a world where, once again, we have characters we're used to seeing just have pure motives of emotional wanting vengeance, but Jin always was constantly putting his people first. Now, a big difference for Jin and Atsu as compared to Edward and Connor is there's only a few decades different between Edward and Connor. There is about 300 years. Actually, I forget. There's several hundred years between the difference between Jin and Atsu. And there lies the issue. Atsu isn't somebody who's trained by Jin. Atsu isn't somebody who grew up on the story of the ghost. And Atsu isn't somebody who has some huge guiding mentor to put her on the right path. Atsu doesn't have any of that. What Atsu had from the beginning was inconsistency with her character. You see, similar to Edward, and this was a big aspect of why I hated Edward, is we never got to see how Edward was so good at being an assassin without training. Similar to Atsu, we had no idea why she was so good at fighting because we were never shown it. We're told she went down south and fought in several of the wars. You know, it would have been great if we actually had seen that. Because all we saw from Atsu at the beginning of the game was her getting clapped up by the snake. If it wasn't for that wolf, she would have been dead. So I was not really impressed with Atsu going in. I would say that for Edward. Where Edward, I was like rolling my eyes at. With Atsu, I was just like, I don't think you're ready, hun. I don't think you're ready to take on the Yotei 6. But for some reason, Atsu walks away with that, and people are already scared of her. Sorry, were the people in that village not like, yes, they watched her stand up and I guess rise from the dead, but they just like, okay, but she did almost get killed, and I guess that random wolf saved her. That's not really a feat. She also killed the weakest member of the Yotei 6 and a man who was dying. But for some reason, some of the guys they send after her once she gets to the end later on are terrified of her doing an unreal howl. Though at the end of the day, what I do believe killed Atsu the most for me was her inconsistency as a character. You see, even the three characters I've already listed before weren't the same weren't the same throughout the whole game. Connor developed from being a naive person, thinking that following the Creed, taking out the Camp Templars, and liberating the colonies from England would achieve freedom for everybody. If you picked up a history book, we all know that's not true. Edward realized that his greed and his ambition was not only destroying himself, but it had already destroyed all those around him. If he didn't change course, he would have nothing left in life. Jin had to forsake everything: his home, his land, his uncle, his family, his legacy. Jin gave up everything to save his people. And there was just something noble about it, something that I feel like we need more of. But with Atsu, every moment of her game felt predictable. Her thirst for revenge. But at the same time, that was only in the story. You see, Atsu's character and her biggest flaw is the writing is very inconsistent with her. Atsu will go about having a rant about how she only cares about her revenge against the Yotei Six, but then take some time to help a village that's currently being occupied. Why does she do this if she only cares about vengeance? She doesn't even ask anybody if they have any information on the Six. She just does it. And even in the first village you liberate and save, when they say that they were actually occupied because of the Onryo's activity on the plane, she's like, oh, well, they probably had a good reason. I'm like, okay, you can't be heroic and then do that and then just say that at the same time. Atsu doesn't really act heroic at all, which most of the time I'm okay with. I gave Kratos a pass for it, even though young Kratos was just as annoying to me, slaughtering innocent people without any need. His cruelty was so forced, so edgy. It's boring. But the biggest flaw for Atsu also came in her hypocrisy and how she handled the Yotei Six. Now, if you've played Ghost of Yotei, you will know that the first chapter of the game is very has an open-ended mission system, which allows you to choose which one of the six you wish to go after. Now, the two biggest ones that kind of determine how the game will play out for you is the Oni and the Kitsune. Spoilers ahead. Now, I picked the Oni because it made the most sense. I'm gonna go after the Oni and everything. It just made more sense to me. I don't know why. But in going after the Oni, lo and behold, it's revealed that Atsu's brother, who was supposedly killed, is not dead, but instead he was saved by the samurai, adopted, and became a samurai. Jibei is a lot like Jin. He's heroic, he's selfless, he puts the people before anything else. And he's a little bit discouraged that Atsu's like just some heartless mercenary. But what really kills it for me is when they eventually do get to the Oni's castle, that they have both a chance to go after the Oni, but they also have a chance to save the samurai and the prisoners who have been enslaved, forced to rebuild the castle, the Oni currently is occupying. Now, while I was playing this, I'm like, we should save the samurai. It would make most sense. They're all celebrating. They're probably drunk. If we save the samurai, we have more of a chance probably to not only save everybody, but even kill the only in the chaos. But Atsu says, screw them. She doesn't care about them. She only cares about going after the Oni. And when that fails, Jubei calls her out on it, to which she says, our father was murdered and you are out here playing samurai. No, Jubei's out here actually living by the rules that and the ideals that their father taught them. Atsu's just being a dick. But, I guess Jinbei's wrong because he has to apologize later for it because he doesn't know what Atsu's been through. And you know what? Yeah, a lot of characters have been through stuff. But some characters don't take it out on others. Some characters actually still try to be good. And they don't flip flop between being heroic and being this cruel douchebag for no reason. I digress. You kill the Oni, you part ways with your brother for now because you're like, well, I'll figure this out. I'll figure out what our relationship's gonna be. So off to the kitsune. Now, I predicted the kitsune was a woman. It made the most sense. Like it just felt logical to me. So I was a little bit surprised when the kitsune was acting more like a man behind the mask, and then this random chick shows up, Oyuki, which by the way, she looks great for her age. Like this is supposed to be like a woman pushing like 30s, 40s, living up here in in like this cold winter. I know that's not good for your skin and your health. She looking great compared to Atsu. Atsu out here looking like she's 80. I love how in the game they also make fun of her for kind of being ugly too. But I digress. You go on this little quest and it's revealed, big shocker, the kitsune was a woman and Oyuki's the kitsune. And well, Atsu does the whole, well, I want to kill you. I really want to kill you. I can't forgive you. Even though the kitsune's only crime is that she didn't act on her like ideals of stopping Lord Saito. But when you really think about it, doesn't this game have an open mission structure? And that's the issue. What if you had chosen to go after the Kitsune first and then the Oni? How does that whole lecture that Atsu gave the Jinbei sound? The hypocrisy of how she technically spared one of the individuals who was there the night that her mother and father died, who technically played a role and did nothing, who actually helped them get there in the first place, too. How does that sound when you're just forgiving this person? Even more worse that now you've invited them to our home. You allowed them to just be here, and I'm supposed to be okay with this. I'm supposed to forgive them. It makes no sense. And Atsu's like that throughout the entire game. She's flip flopping between trying to be a heroic and trying to be vengeful. And the bigger issue later on is the rest of this whole revenge plot just gets basic. Like you predict everything. The moment Jinbei was acting funny, I'm like, yo, bro's got a family and bro's gonna die by the end of the game. Flash forward. Atsu does a dick move. Jinbei gets captured. More stuff happens. Poor Jinbei gets killed. Did Atsu learn anything? No, she learned the basic lesson as usual that revenge is not worth it and blah, blah. She learned to put her sword down. You know what would have been better? If she had done exactly like Jin. If she had learned that revenge wasn't worth it and that the Onryo shouldn't be just a force for vengeance, that she should walk similar to the path of the ghost, that she should try to honor this person who came before her, which I'm even more shocked that Jin played no major important role in this game. Like, he has one side quest. That's it. That's all Jin's importance in the game is. Nothing more important is brought up about him. How you can visit the man's house, but that's it. Nothing more. Atsu retires, puts the swords down, looks after Jinbei's kid. Yeah, the whole standard revenge doesn't matter thing. But the problem is Atsu then was that just means Atsu was annoying to the end of the game. Her inconsistency, her hypocrisy, her attitude, her lack of manners, her disrespect, and the fact that where she's supposed to be this great warrior, yet she fails almost at everything she tries to do multiple times. And then we were also never allowed to see her actually be cool or show that she earned these skills. I think a big issue nowadays is whenever we call out inconsistencies and flaws in these characters, you have these group of people who always be like, "Well, you didn't say this about this character." That's these other people who haven't said these about these characters, but I'm always saying these about these characters because I don't care if a character is a male or a woman, white or black. If they're badly written, they're badly written. Atsu literally just spat on Jin's legacy, where Connor was an improvement upon the Kenway legacy with Edward from Edward. Atsu just spits on the Ghost legacy. She basically isn't even the Ghost. She might as well just call it the Onryo of Yotei, because that's all she was. She was just a force of vengeance. Hell, she didn't even care for like. It's not like Jin when he was given offerings by the people who believed in the ghost. He was like humble about it. Atsu was just like meh, or I really don't care, and why are people believing in me? Like you're so annoying. Like you have an opportunity to become a symbol of your people, so that none of the tragic things that happen to you in your life happen to others. And you have the power. You've demonstrated you have the power to make great change in your life. I don't really understand what Sucker Punch was really going for with Atsu's characters. And I'm not even surprised that Ghost of Yotei didn't win any Game of the Year awards. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful game. It has great gameplay, but its narrative is incredibly lacking as compared to Jin. Jin's entire character is quotable. Jin's entire character inspired probably a generation of gamers to be better, just like and I'm not saying like on the level of Arthur Morgan, but probably to try and be better men. And that's why you have these characters who are icons compared to those who aren't. So many of the previous Assassin's Creed protagonists are famous because of the growth of their character. When you look at characters like Atsu, you don't see that growth. And when you see it, it was like, too little, too late. It doesn't even matter. I hope future game studios never do this whole open ended mission system again. And also really do abandon this whole philosophy of the girl boss. It's not getting them anywhere. When one walks the path of the warrior, I would simply say look at what came before, but try to improve upon it. Try to work upon it. What does it mean to be a warrior in this day and age? Will you choose to be heroic and honor the title you've been given, that your opportunity to move forward to add to this legacy, this legend? Or will you spit upon it? Ironically, once more, I do believe Assassin's Creed has handled this idea a lot better. But going forward, I think the Ghost franchise will definitely need to pivot in a different direction if they wanted to stick the landing. Like Ghost of the Yotei sold great, but for me, it's just its character never came close to the man who started it all. I'd like to thank you for joining me all for this little rant today. And if you're still watching, like and subscribe. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace out.